This is a picture of Ireland Kurdi. Some of you may remember it made global headlines on the morning of September 3rd, 2015. Ireland was 3 years old and he drowned in the Mediterranean Sea and his body washed up on the shores of Turkey. He, his mother, father, and his brother made a treacherous journey from Syria, seeking a safer world for themselves in Europe. Only his father survived. What do you feel when you look at this photo? Do you feel sad? Do you feel overwhelmed? The need to look away? Or do you feel something else? Do you feel an anger at a world that has created systems that incentivizes this kind of suffering for some people on the planet? For me, when I look at this picture, I feel deep sadness, but I also connect to a deep anger. And if I look at this picture for long enough and think about the context in which little Ireland lived and died, I start thinking about Ireland. I'm thinking about how this happened and why. And how can I stop this from happening to other children? How can I become a part of the change? Today, I want to talk to you about my lived experience with anger and why I embrace anger as a gift. I know some of you would be like, what is that? Because the dominant view about anger, that it is a negative state that we must avoid, seek to avoid, control, or manage, has never really resonated with me. Because stripped of violence, hatred, and bitterness, anger is just a powerful energy. It is a frequency, and it is a frequency that you can access. And this frequency has become one of my most profound teachers. Recently, scientists in 2003 and 2010 actually started researching a new dimension of empathy. They call it empathic anger. And those scientists made a distinction between feeling sad because someone is suffering, empathic sadness, and feeling angry because someone else is suffering. And what those scientists found was that when you feel angry for what someone else is suffering, that is actually more of a predictor of pro-social behavior that goes beyond alleviating the suffering of the individual and goes toward how do I prevent future harm. Now, why am I standing here before you, talking to you about anger and making it such a big part of my life's work to research the neuroscience of anger? I am not a neuroscientist. I am not a psychologist. I am not even a counselor. And I could go on with a list of how many things I am not. I am a lawyer and I am a social entrepreneur now working with innovators and professionals to bring about systemic change. So where did it start for me? I remember I was about 5 years old and my mother was taking my brother and I, he was 6, my brother Daniel, and she was taking us out. And I was excited to go out with my mom, and we were walking out the gate and she was holding us, each of us in one of her hands. And I remember looking up at her and thinking how beautiful she was. She had this beach sand complexion, skin, and jet long black hair, straight, flowing behind her back. And she had a part in the middle of her head, the way they used to wear it in the 70s. And yes, I'm revealing my age there. But she was beautiful. And I remember looking up at her and looking at my little chocolate hand in her creamier one and thinking, I wonder if I'm going to grow up to be like her, to look like her. And it seemed to me in that moment when I was having that thought, I may have conflated the memories in past, but in my mind, in that moment, my mother stopped walking, turned around, stooped down, drew us in to each other, to her. She was eyeball to eyeball with us. She's looking at us, and she says, she has a little smile on her face, and she says, hey guys, don't call me mommy, okay? Call me Auntie Kathy. She must have seen something in us because neither my brother and I said anything. We didn't even look at each other because she quickly added, oh, because I don't want anyone to know I have children as old as you. Even back then at 5, something about that reason for not calling her mommy didn't ring true to me. You see, I am from Trinidad and Tobago, which is a twin island state in the English-speaking Caribbean. And our two major ethnic groups are of East Indian descent and of African descent. The Africans were brought there as slaves, and after emancipation, the East Indians were brought as indentured laborers. And there is a lot of enmity and animosity and strife between these two groups. And so I guess it's not difficult to understand why a young East Indian woman may have felt that she had to tell her kids that when they were going out, kids that were very dark-skinned and looked like African children. Don't call me mommy, okay? Call me Auntie Kathy. I felt like someone had cuffed me. I felt I couldn't breathe when she said it. And in that moment, we're talking about moments today. In that moment began my struggle to understand my own self-worth and value in a world where I felt my own mother could not. And things were exacerbated. I know this is sounding all very sad. We will lift it up at some point. But things were exacerbated when my aunts took my brother and I, my father's sisters took my brother and I to live with them. And with no explanation to us. We had no idea why were we living with these aunts. And the only thing we could see is that the aunts had more money. And so early on, this message was reinforced in me that, money somehow had more value than family, than connection, than love. And I grew up feeling powerless. And with that powerlessness, I was angry. And I became rebellious. I heard I gave all this trouble in school, and I probably did. I'm not saying I didn't, but I was told I would amount to nothing. I was told that as a teenager, that I was only interested in looking for men. That's something we see in Trinidad and Tobago. I guess I was looking for my value and my self-worth. I was told that I would either end up a prostitute or pregnant and unwed. I would be a dropout. I was told all those things. And through all of that time, there was one thing that saved me. When I turned 16, I actually was kicked out of school. And when I turned 19, I was actually pregnant and unwed. Yes, I fulfilled the expectations of others. And I guess when you have your no self-worth and value, the expectations of others become a very powerful thing. But the one thing that saved me is that I did not in all of my environment and all of my experiences, I did not become sad, depressed, and overwhelmed. I did not turn to drugs and alcohol like many of our hurting teenagers do today. I became angry. When people said these things to me, a deep surge of emotion bubbled up inside of me, an aggressive energy. And I took that energy and I said, no, I am of value. Watch my dust. And so that when I was 16 and kicked out of school, I said, watch my dust. I continued studying. I got my O-levels and I got into another school to do my A-levels. And by 19, when I was pregnant and unwed, I had also finished my first year of university studying law. They told me I needed to have an abortion, or else my life would be ruined. I chose not to. I said, watch my dust. I had my son, and a few days later, I was back in university, did not miss a beat, and qualified as a lawyer at the age of 22. But when they put my son in my arms, for the first time in my life, that surge of emotion that I used to feel was different. I felt love, unconditional love. Those of you who've had children here, you know what I'm talking about. This protective energy. You would do anything for this life, this miracle that is in your hands. And when they put him in my hands, I looked at this little baby, all perfect. And a little piece of me began to heal. Because as I looked at my baby all perfect, I saw myself there. And I said, I too was a baby like this, perfect. Not needing to strive to prove my value to anyone. I had value just because I was. And in that moment of love and joy and peace, I actually felt this anger boiling up inside of me again in that moment. And this anger was not aimed at anyone, but it was aimed at a society, at a world that separated children from this feeling of value and worth, this connection. And in there was born the creative question of my life. And that creative question was subconscious then. I've done work to understand this now, but this was all subconscious. But my creative question was, how might I create a world where human value is given priority over economic value, over societal expectations, pressures, and man-made rules? And to answer that question, I felt I had a responsibility to do more than just yoga. And so at 22, when I qualified, when all of my friends were getting jobs with big law firms and in-house counsel and really, driving nice cars and all that, I became a legal aid criminal defense attorney because I felt connected to people that society felt had no value. I could see their value and I fought for them. People say, Margaret, why are you doing that? I'm like, they have value, they deserve a defense. As I matured and in the law, I specialized in public procurement law, which is the law that governs how governments buy, which, when you think about it, is really about how governments identify, measure, and place value in society. Now I work with entrepreneurs and lawyers to try to help them navigate the twin pursuit of creating social value alongside economic value. You see, your anger can point you to grief that requires healing, but it can also be the gravity for your purpose. And when you begin living in that purpose, it unlocks the doors for healing, for forgiveness, for gratitude for your past. And so my mom today is one of my closest friends. I love her, she loves me. This is my brother Daniel. Last year, she had to go through something no other mother should have. She stood at the bedside of her son, Daniel, 48 years old, every night, day and night, as he passed on to another realm. And she held him and she said, "Don't worry, my son. Mommy is here." There are 4 things my story about anger can teach us, and we don't have enough time, but this is backed up by the research. 1, anger points us to that which we are deeply connected. 2, anger gives us an uncommon fuel for action, a courage to take action when ordinarily we would not have it. Anger points us to that which we feel most profoundly responsible for, our boundaries, what we are willing to fight for. And interestingly, anger, the scientists in 2015, a study showed, is positively correlated with innovation and creativity, and more so than love. Connection, action, responsibility, and entrepreneurship. So angry people care. They do. They do. And I want to say one thing which could be controversial to some of you. The highest path, the highest use of anger is not the path of protest. Even non-violent protest, it's not. The highest path of anger is the path of empathy, seeking to find your purpose, seeking to help others, and seeking to solve some of the most pressing problems facing people and planet today. That's the highest use of your anger. And so if you are not angry at the systems and the injustices that you're seeing in the world today, then that means you're content. You are content. And if you are content, that contentment will never drive real change. And change is required in this time. In this time, in 2017, the World Economic Forum indicated for the first time that rising levels of public anger are threatening our security and safety, the fabric of our society. If you and I, if we do not begin to work more collectively and consciously with our anger, we will find that those who have the power to manipulate our attention will cause us to misdirect this powerful energy toward each other, toward contrived enemies, when the real enemy, the real task ahead of us is system change. I leave you with 2 things. This is Island again, 2 invitations. When you see the photo, don't look away. Not only at Island, but the injustices in your community, in the world. Don't look away. And when you find what makes you feel angriest, that which you feel most profoundly responsible for, I ask, my second invitation is, don't say I'm angry. Say, I care. And then do the work to figure out what it is I care about enough to act. Our collective future depends on this. Thank you.